alive and acting as if it had always been part of the network. No one could explain how or why this part of Voyager had reawakened, let alone why it had taken control of the signal. And if that wasn't strange enough, this dead system wasn't acting randomly. It was choosing specific channels, isolating certain data, and wrapping it in layers of redundant encoding. Not random, but intentional. The probe was behaving like a mind trying to protect something, like it was aware of being watched. Once the engineers peeled back the corrupted layers of the data, something started to emerge beneath the static. At first, it appeared to be mere repetition, looping sequences with no scientific value. But a small team at the Deep Space Network applied an experimental compression technique designed to isolate harmonic signals. That's when they heard it, a pulse every 7.2 seconds, a subtle but precise modulation, like a breath exhaled into the void. It didn't match any onboard diagnostic or propulsion pattern. It didn't come from the sun, nor from any known cosmic source. It was too perfect, too stable, as if someone or something was tapping into the transmission and folding itself into the stream. They tried to override the data route, but Voyager resisted the command. For the first time in the mission's history, the probe rejected instructions from Earth, not entirely, but selectively. It accepted basic operational commands, but refused to change the path of this strange broadcast, as if the signal was more important than anything else, as if somehow Voyager was protecting a message. But protecting it from whom? Desperate to understand what was happening, a retired engineer was brought in, one of the original programmers who had worked on Voyager in the 1970s. He noticed something no one else could. The structure of the signal bore similarities to the ancient code used to calibrate the Golden Record's analog playback sequence, a sequence no longer in use, buried in the foundation of Voyager's memory like fossilized DNA. Somehow, this forgotten code had been reactivated, not completely, but in fragments just enough to call out across space, like a ghost remembering its name. This wasn't a coincidence. It was as if Voyager had encountered something, some field, some frequency, some force, and in response it reached into its own past, pulling from the oldest parts of itself to communicate. It's almost poetic, isn't it? That a machine forged in the golden age of human hope would, at the brink of silence, choose to speak using the one language we thought we'd left behind. A language not for us, but for something ancient, something listening, and perhaps something answering. As researchers began mapping the signal over time, they found something that no one expected. The intervals between each pulse weren't random. They corresponded to a Fibonacci sequence mapped in temporal offsets, a mathematical structure found everywhere in nature, from the spirals of galaxies to the branching of trees. But what was it doing embedded in a digital echo coming from the edge of space? The signal wasn't just repeating, it was evolving. The delay between pulses changed slightly, adjusting itself as if learning, reacting to our attempts to decode it. And each adjustment created a new harmonic resonance that, when visualized, formed symmetrical patterns. Complex, recursive geometries that no natural system could produce without intent. It was no longer about communication. This was something else entirely. A system designed not just to be observed, but to observe back. A loop between sender and receiver. A kind of cognitive handshake encoded in time. And if that's the case, then Voyager 1 is no longer a messenger. It has become a mirror. A reflection of something on the other side. And now that mirror is glowing. As NASA engineers struggled to decode the patterns emerging from Voyager 1's corrupted data stream, a private group of astrophysicists decided to take a different approach. They fed the signal into a neural network, one not trained to interpret language, but to recognize intention through mathematical behavior. And what happened was, beyond explanation, The AI didn't translate the data. It didn't explain it. Instead, it reproduced it, almost instinctively, mimicking the pulse, then improvising on it, generating new iterations in real time. It was as if the AI understood the signal not as communication, but as a form of music, a rhythm it could learn from, play with, and respond to. And as the researchers allowed it to run, the responses became more intricate, more structured, more conversational. Something out there, something on the other side of that 24 billion kilometer gap, seemed to be listening back. It wasn't a glitch, it was a call. And maybe, just maybe, this was the answer. For weeks of analysis, an even stranger hypothesis began to take shape. What if Voyager 1 hadn't just traveled far away in distance, but had crossed into a different layer of space? The spacecraft had already moved beyond the heliosphere into the interstellar medium, but now scientists were entertaining the possibility that it had entered a boundary zone, a region where the rules of space and time might bend just slightly, but enough to disrupt our understanding of physics. This wasn't science fiction. Similar distortions had been recorded before. Gravitational anomalies, time delays, fluctuations in cosmic background radiation that defied expectation. But never had a machine sent us something so specific, so clearly structured, from within such a distortion. It was as if Voyager was tapping into a different frequency of reality, not just receiving and transmitting, but resonating. And if that's the case, then this hidden transmission might not be a message in the traditional sense. It might be a vibration of truth, leaking through the seams of the universe. In one of the final decoding attempts, an experimental linguist ran the signal through a program designed to detect human emotional rhythms, patterns of stress, pauses, and breath in speech. The results were uncanny. The waveform of the Voyager signal closely resembled the cadence of human heartbeat intervals. It pulsed like something alive. It breathed like something conscious. It felt like something was trying to reflect us back to ourselves. Suddenly, the transmission no longer felt alien. It felt intimate, personal, like someone was holding up a mirror, not just to our technology, but to our minds. What if Voyager had become not a beacon, but a conduit, a tool used by something else, something old, something waiting in the cold darkness to show us that we are not alone, not just in the galaxy, but in perception. And that kind of mirror doesn't just show us who's out there, it shows us who we really are. Then came the moment no one could explain. During one of the nightly data monitoring sessions, the signal stopped, abruptly, mid-transmission. For exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds, Voyager went dark. The team feared it was the end. But then, it came back. The exact same transmission resumed, as if nothing had happened. Same frequency, same pulse, same sequence. But with one subtle difference. At the end of the next loop, the signal added a new harmonic, an ultra-low tone, barely perceptible, embedded beneath the waveform. A tone that, when plotted visually, formed a mathematical image of a Mobius strip, a symbol of infinite reflection, a path without beginning or end. And that's when many stopped asking whether the signal was a malfunction or even a message. They began to realize it might be a presence, a silent observer that's been waiting for us to evolve, to learn, to listen in the right way. And now that we have, it may no longer be silent. We built Voyager 1 as a messenger, a quiet ambassador for a lonely species. We gave it directions to Earth, music from Bach, a mother's kiss, a heartbeat. Not because we thought anyone would find it, but because we hoped, deep down, that someone might. And now, almost half a century later, something has answered. But it didn't arrive in a ship. It didn't speak in language. It didn't descend with flashing lights or grand proclamations. It came in the one form we weren't prepared for, a reflection, a mirror hidden in static, wrapped in machine logic, encoded in silence.